Hello, Garland Nixon here with Scott Ritter, and Scott's back from Russia, and we got a lot we have to learn from him. Let's talk. Hello, Garland and Scott here, and Scott's back from Russia. He's been doing doing fine work in the wonderful country of Russia, and met with a lot of people. I've seen Scott all over the place online. There's plenty to talk about when it comes to war-related things, but let's start with this, Scott. I think that was an important trip. I saw this great video of you talking to the troops in Chechnya. I want to learn a lot about, we want to learn about what you did. But first, that Chechnya, the Chechnya incident, that sounds like a movie, right? The Chechnya incident. What about that, Scott?
Well, I visited Chechnya at the invitation of the Chechen government. I had been there in May, and when they found out that I was back in Russia, they said, "Hey, Scott has to come back here." And one of the reasons is that I think they like the fact that an American recognizes the miracle that is Chechnya today. Now, I'm not going to sit here and blow smoke up people's rear ends about, Jeffersonian democracy and, diversity. And that's not Chechnya. Chechnya was a country back in the early 2000s that was in the midst of its second war with Russia, the second war with Russia. It's a very small country, 1.5 million people. Hundreds of thousands of people died. That means more than 10, 15% of the population. Devastated. If you looked at photographs of Grozny back in 2002, it looked like Stalingrad, leveled city. And it was just, here's the other thing that most Americans don't get. Now, if I said Hatfield and McCoy to Americans, they go, oh yeah, the feud where the Hatfields and McCoys fought it out. Chechnya is a walk and talk and live and breathing Hatfield and McCoy situation. Blood feuds are a reality. You kill a Chechen, their clan is coming after you to get retribution, blood. And what was happening in Chechnya is that because it was bitterly divided over the nature of the second conflict, which was largely driven by CIA-funded Wahhabist foreigners who were coming in and trying to corrupt the Sunni Sufism of Chechnya. I'm getting into, inside politics on religion here, but understand that the Chechens are not natural-born Wahhabists. They revile that. The brand of Sufism that they have embraced is one that is actually it endorses peaceful resolution, peaceful coexistence, but you kill a Chechen, they're coming after you. And so Chechnya was literally eating itself in the 2000s. And Vladimir Putin met with Akhmat Kadyrov, the father of Ramzan Kadyrov, who's the current head. Akhmat Kadyrov isn't just a leader. He was the Grand Mufti. He was the senior Islamic dude in Chechnya. He's a guy that was at the heart of the first Chechen war that got Chechnya its independence from Russia. And he's a staunch believer in Chechen values, etc. But he's also a guy, as a religious man, said what's happening here is the destruction of Chechnya, not at the hands of Russia, but at the hands of the West. And so he sat down with Putin and they worked out a solution. This is why I call it the miracle, because in 1999, I don't think you could find a single person anywhere in the world that said, yeah, Vladimir Putin just came in. I see this guy sitting down with the Chechens and working out a peace treaty where they both get along great and Chechnya gets, virtual autonomy. No, they said this is a war to the death. No, it wasn't. Putin sought peace, so did Kadyrov, and they worked it out. Now, Kadyrov was assassinated in 2004 by the CIA-backed Wahhabist forces that didn't want peace. His son, Ramzan Kadyrov, couldn't take over till he was 30 years old, had to wait a couple years, but he took over, appointed by Vladimir Putin to carry on his father's legacy. And that legacy is of the redemption of the Chechen people. You take a look at Chechnya today. Look, the Russians and the Chechens peacefully coexist. For every mosque that goes up in Grozny, an Orthodox church goes up in Grozny. Um, there's zero tension here. I mean, there's always tension. Humans are humans, but I'm talking about compared to what was for. So I recognized that then, and they wanted to continue, I guess, what we call the education of Scott. Um, and so I came in and I got some fantastic opportunities. I got a tour of the Akhmat Kadyrov museum where I got to see all of the history brought back to life of the peace talks between Kadyrov and Putin. I got to see Chechen culture. They gave us a performance at the Chechen dance ensemble. Fantastic until they invited me on the stage to dance with them, and then it became a nightmare. But I got to meet the senior leadership of Chechnya, and I mean, I'm talking about not just Ramzan Kadyrov, but Adam Delikanov, Mahmoud Dudayev, Apti Aduanov. These are the guys that make Chechnya what it is today, which is a thriving nation, not a democracy. I'm not pretending it's a democracy. It's not. Do they have transgendered rights? Hell no, and they never will. Do they do they have policies which in the United States we would say are homophobic? Yep, they do, absolutely. But they also in the city of Shali and others where Russians and Chechens slaughtered each other, families walk the street in peace. Homes have been rebuilt. Peace has broken out all over, and the Chechens love Russia, and the Chechens love Vladimir Putin. I had the honor and privilege of being invited to Ramzan Kadyrov's home to have a meeting with him, and he was a kind host. He gave me and my colleagues, my daughter, Alexander Ziryanov, who was my Russian host, and his fiancee Olga. We sat at the table with Ramzan, and we had not just a nice meal, but a fantastic conversation that covered a whole bunch of complicated issues like Russian-Chechen relations, the future of Ukraine conflict, and things of that nature. Now, when I was in Chechnya last May, you might have remembered there was a video where I sort of paraded the troops. I was brought out and I got to meet the Presidential Guard, a couple thousand hardcore Chechens, commanded by the men who fought in Mariupol, et cetera. And I didn't speak to them in a speech, but I met them. I shook their hands, and it was an honor and a privilege. So as the lunch wound down, Kadyrov looks at me, and you see this twinkle in his eyes, and he goes, "Hey, want to see the troops again?" And I'm like, why the hell not? I mean, when in Chechnya, do as the Chechens ask. Let me set this up. As we got out of the car going into Ramzan Kadyrov's residence, I noticed a man near the entrance, and there was this huge white wolf. And when I say huge, I mean huge, gigantic white wolf. And the white wolf is jumping up, and this man's feeding it. It was Ramzan Kadyrov playing with that wolf. And I just imagine him saying, little wolf, I have a big fat American coming for lunch, and he's going to be delicious. I'm just imagining myself being fed to the wolves, literally, because the wolf is the national symbol of Chechnya. But no, it was just Ramzan doing what Ramzan does. So he's like, "Hey, you want to go see the troops?" And I'm like, "Why not?" And he goes, I command 25,000 of them here in Grozny. I went, cool, nice. And so we walk out. As we walk out the back door, I immediately know something's wrong because there's soldiers lining the whole exit. But all I can see is that first line of soldiers. And I'm like, well, damn, this was quick. The troops are right here. Okay. And a soldier comes up and salutes and says, the troops are ready. And then we just keep walking. And it's a rolling, grounds of the palace with hills and everything covered with soldiers. Garland, you have no clue what it was like to walk out and go, holy beep. The whole damn hill is crawling with frickin' Chechen troops, armed to the teeth. I mean, they are in full combat gear, armed. And then as we make the turn, wham, there they are again, all on the hills. And then they part like Moses going through the Red Sea. And we walk through them. And we get to this stage of the presidential main palace, and you look out, and it is literally just a sea of Chechen soldiers. And I'm going, this is the coolest thing I have ever experienced in my life. And then Ramzan gets up there and gives a speech. Now, anybody who knows me, I'm dead honest. My Russian sucks. It is horrible. I understand half of what people say, and I can communicate basic concepts, but I am not a Russian linguist. So I'm sitting there listening to Kadyrov's speech, and it's in heavily accented Russian because he's a Chechen, and I'm getting about a third of it. And I'm going, okay, you know, Ukraine, fighting the forces of evil, Satanism, got it. And then he turns, he goes, and now I'd like to invite Scott Ritter to come and address you. And I went, no, you don't. And he's like, come forward. And I'm like, holy shit. And so now I'm walking up going, what am I even going to say? And Olga, who is Alexander Zyryanov's fiance, she's coming with me to translate. And okay. she's going, please don't do this to me. Please don't. So that meant, damn it, I got to do this in Russian. So I went, if you're going to do something, be bold. So I just strutted up there. Bam, bam, bam. Hi, bam. And I enter into the speech where I had no idea what I was going to say. I'm just saying it, trying to scramble for the few words of Russian that I know, and I'm putting them together. And next thing I know, I have a coherent speech, and it's done. And I walk off the stage going, I survived that. But let me make one other observation. Anybody who's been in the military, have you ever done anything with a American presidential delegation when the president comes to town or something like that?
Yes, I have. I have. In law enforcement, I have on more than one occasion.
And do they remove the ammunition from?
Yes, they do. I sat on the stage behind George W. Bush. I was right behind him on national TV. They stuck me right behind him. But the first thing they did was they took everybody. We didn't even get to take our guns in. I was in law enforcement. Everybody's gun had to go before you came in.
Okay, so now people are like, Kadyrov's hated. Those people don't love him. He's a dictator. Every dude, I mean, these are Chechen warriors. These are, if you've seen them, they're bad dudes, man. And they're up there. They are holding machine guns with live ammunition round in the chamber. I mean, remember, the first time I was there, they did a live fire demonstration, and it was sort of loud. And they look at my daughter Victoria was there with me, and they go, oh, she needs hearing protection. The dude, Lord, that's his name, Lord, pulls out his pistol, takes 2 9mm rounds and shoves them in her ears. So their hearing protection are bullets that you put in your ears, okay? That's the Chechens. Every one of them has locked and loaded. They have live RPGs. They have live machine guns. They're out at 25,000 dudes. Ramzan's not afraid. Ramzan's like, I'm your leader. And they're like, you're our leader. And you have to see it to experience it. This is real. It's not, it's theatrical. Hell, it was an act. He hasn't done that for anybody. I don't know why he did it for me. He didn't do it for Putin. I mean, this was the strangest freaking thing in my life, but it was amazing. But the thing that I walked away from it was, yes, I know it was theater. I know that first of all, where these dudes just live in town. They're literally a pager army. They got all their crap in their house or in their cars. And I guess halfway through the meal, he went, screw it, pushed the button, said, mobilize the garrison. And while we're eating, they're all coming out of their apartment, putting on their crap, locking and loading their weapons, walking through the streets of Grozny, 25,000 men converging on the presidential palace where they're there. And it's just like, holy crap, it was real. But the other thing is, these aren't just Chechen warriors. These are Russian warriors. These guys all fought in Ukraine, and they are as dedicated to this mission as anybody. You can call them Chechens, and they damn well know they're Chechens, but they all wear the flag of Russia on their arm, and they fight for Russia, and they fight for Vladimir Putin. And you can call them TikTok warriors all you want. I had dinner with Adam Delikanov. He's the commander of the Chechen forces that helped capture Mariupol, helped the final battles of Azovstal. Dude's real. I mean, I was asking him questions during the meal, like, okay, screw it. I got the commander here. I'm going to ask questions about the battle. On the way out of his residence, he goes, come on into my study. And we come in the study, and he pulls out the actual maps that he used fighting the battle. He pulls them out, lays them out on his table, and he starts explaining to me, showing the Ukrainian forces where his concentration was, explaining his tactics, his battle plan, his strategy. Then he opens up the his little laptop thing, and he starts showing me the actual, imagery that the Russians used, overlaid with day by day. Saying, okay, this is what we're doing this day. Then he points to the map
Wow.
and he flicks it, and I'm sitting there going, holy shit, if I was in active duty right now, I'd get a god darn medal, because this is the coolest shit in the world. Excuse my language, but I mean,
Yeah.
I'm being briefed by the commander using classified material. It was
Wow.
just, but this is there's I had dinner with Abdi Alduanov. He was the current commander of Chechen forces. He's now been assigned to the Russian General Staff Academy. So he's moving his way up the thing. But talking to this guy, he was a hardcore anti-Russian Chechen guerrilla.
Hmm.
He was on the other side, and he at one point in time he listened to Akhmat Kadyrov, and he went, "Yeah, I get it. I'm taking a look at these bad people," included a guy named Shamil Basayev, who was a Chechen, but he had gone over to the dark side. And he's like, Shamil doesn't represent what I represent. So he joined them. He was given the task of after Beslan, after the slaughter of the Russian children in Beslan, of hunting down Shamil Basayev. With 6 men, he went into the mountains, and for 6 months, he tracked down Shamil Basayev and 150 Chechen guerrillas, and he killed them. They slaughtered his entire family. They killed his father, his brothers, his uncles. 20 of his closest relatives were slaughtered. Shamil Basayev did. But Abdi stayed loyal to the cause and killed. And then, as part of when the war ended, you lose 20 members. That means you're going down to each clan that killed, and you're going to kill them. And Abdi is a hell of a man. I mean, nice guy. But you look in his eyes, you go, I'm in the presence of a killer. This guy will, if he had to, he'd kill me right now. Right now, no questions asked. He'd smile. But to show you the strength of the charisma of Akhmet Kadyrov and his son, Ramzan, they convinced Abdi and all the Chechen men to stop the blood feud. It's over. It's finished. It's done. Bury the hatchet. And it took a while, and there's still some tension there, because the blood feud is real. The Chechen soldiers that died, just for all the Ukrainians listening, understand this. If a Chechen soldier dies in Ukraine and they bring him back and they bury him, there's a marking, a flag that goes up on the grave that says that he has not been avenged. And the flag can't come down until he's been avenged. So that means that every single one of these damn Ukrainians that are out there are thinking, that's war's going to end. Nope, they're going to hunt you down and kill you for the rest of your life. That's the way the Chechens work. Do not piss off the Chechens. So this is real. This is real as it gets. So as much as fun as it was one of the most empowering experiences of my life in driving home the absolute reality. And here's the thing. In the United States, nobody's listening to me. I mean, you are, and I know there's people listening here, but everybody's going, the Chechens, this, that. Guys, this is real. And if you don't understand how real this is, then you don't understand this conflict. You don't understand anything that's going on there. This is why it was an invaluable experience, and I'm going to do my best to try and capture it and get it out there so that it's more than just, wow, Scott Ritter was in front of 25,000 people. Whatever you think about it, there's people that hate me for it, condemn me for it. I don't care. There's people who think it's the coolest thing in the world. I agree. It was the coolest thing in the world. But it, more than being cool, it was part of a process where the Chechens are going out of their way to educate an American about the reality of Chechnya today. And that's the takeaway, is that Chechnya is not some, land of fanatics that can be ripped out of Russia like many in the West want to do. Chechnya is part of the Russian Federation. It is, in many ways, represents the heart and soul of, an important aspect of the Russian Federation, because Russia is a nation not just of Russian Slavs. It's a very diverse nation with hundreds of ethnicities. The Chechens are one of these ethnicities, and the Chechens are a prime example of how non-Slavic nations, non-Slavic people view themselves as Russian. Russian is more than just being a Slav. Russian is a national identity that that transcends religion, because the Chechens are Muslim. They are deeply religious people, and the Russians are deeply Orthodox Christian, and they get along great. They get along great.
Um, I did want to ask you about this, the Ukraine conflict. It seems to me, you and I have talked about this, and we've used the word for months and months. How does this end? Collapse. We're seeing internal fights that have been going on. We've poisonings and Christmas gifts and birthday gifts blowing up and all those kinds of things. But now it appears that from what I'm seeing, there, of course, there's still fighting to be done. It seems like the lines are starting to fall apart. Avdiivka is falling. Your thoughts on the state of the battlefield and internally, this political collapse that's going on. They shot down a plane full of their own POWs. It seems like maybe it was an accident. Late screw. I don't know, but whatever. Your thoughts on the state of of the conflict, Scott Ritter.
Well, one of the interesting parts of this trip is that I actually did get to go to all 4 of the new territories and Crimea. And I was able to have meetings with 3 of the 5 governors of these territories, along with military commanders. And it's always best to see it firsthand. It was a quick trip. I'm literally not going to sit here and pretend that I didn't have the Chechen experience in the new territories, if you know what I'm saying. I didn't get the in-depth, get into the weeds kind of thing. This was a very quick thing, but I'm a former military intelligence officer who made a living doing quick observations and putting 2 + 2 together. Plus, I got to meet the senior political figures of 3 of the 5 territories, and got to meet senior military commanders. I think the biggest takeaway is the optimism of everybody involved, meaning there was, how when things aren't going well, even if you want them to go well and you believe in it, you meet somebody and you see that sort of defeated, haggard look, the tired look. It doesn't mean they've lost, but it means they're not winning. That means that wasn't there. Everybody I met was like, this is it, the final push. We're there, man. We're there. We're there. We're moving. 2 of the governors, basically said, on to Odessa. I mean, they're like, yep, we're going to Odessa, Nikolaev. This is it. I saw things that I won't go into, just because I'm going to respect the Russians and not give away national secrets. They let me in, and they didn't try to hide anything from me, but I think they forgot for a moment who I was and what my background was. And so there's indicators that what the governors were saying wasn't just hot air, it's the real thing. When you meet, to give you an example, the battle of and I need to learn how to say this word. I think it's not Advika, I think it's Avdiivka. I don't know, but what battle I'm talking about.
Yeah, my understanding is Avdiivka also. So yeah. I think you're right. Yeah.
There's a unit there that's been very heavily engaged in the assault aspects of this fighting, which is bloody. In October, leading the assaults there, 3,000 troops in this unit died, Russians. And I'm like, holy God, maybe the Ukrainians are right. They're getting slaughtered, and the guy went, nah, we killed 20,000 of them. He said, yeah, it's hard fighting. It's tough fighting. He told me a story about the commander of an assault unit that was clearing the first line of trenches when a mortar went off, blew off 3 of his fingers on his hand, blew his testicles off, boom, right off. And he's bleeding out. And in shock, he picked up his testicles because, he's like, oh. And then he got so mad, he started charging the lines, and his troops were faltering. So with balls in his hands, he goes running off to the second trench line, and his troops follow him. And he gets in there, and they start slaughtering the Ukrainians. Ukrainians are counterattacking. It's brutal, brutal. People are dying all over the place. And the sort of the Ukrainian command group came around the side, and a grenade landed at his feet. So he dropped his balls, picked up the grenade, threw the grenade at them, killed them, picked up a weapon, firing in his offhand, led the charge, and they won the battle. This is the unit that suffered 3,000 dead. But this is the kind of heroism that you see. And again, remember, the Ukrainians have heroes too. They're out there fighting. This is a hard fight. But the Russians, these aren't people who are afraid to fight. Everybody's like, oh, they're mobilized, they're this, they're that. They are in it to win it. And they're not going to do stupid things. They will fight hard when they need to fight. And the Ukrainians are resisting. So if your tank's out of position, or you didn't back it up with adequate air defense, bam, you're going to die. And the 3 guys in the tank are dead. And that's happening a lot. The Russians are losing a lot of equipment. They're losing a lot of men. But the Ukrainians are losing everything. Everything. The casualty ratio, the kill ratio is 7-1 in October. Today it's 20-1. 20-1. That is for every Russian dying, and a lot of Russians are dying. 20 Ukrainians are dying. This is a massacre like you can't imagine what's happening, and nobody can imagine it. And it's unsustainable. And this is why you see the Russians starting to make their move across. The collapse has occurred, Garland. It's occurring as we speak. It just takes a long time for this edifice to crumble down, but it's happening. And I just remind everybody, there's at least 2 combined arms armies that are in the immediate area that have not been committed to this fight. Okay, so it's just this is a bad day for the Ukrainians, a bad time for the Ukrainians. Look, they're still they have good weapons. They have people who know how to use these weapons, and Russians are going to continue to die. I always remind people that the bloodiest month for America in World War II was April 1945, the last month of the war, after the Germans had been defeated, when the bulk of their elite units had been disintegrated, where 60% of their force were these old men and boys, the Volks, whatever the hell they called them, the Volks people soldiers, I can't remember, but the Volkssturm or something like that. But they were fighting, they fought fanatically, and they killed a lot of Americans. There's the idea, just because the Ukrainians are collapsing doesn't mean that the resistance isn't there and that the fighting isn't going to be heavy. But it's over for Ukraine. I mean, hell, you got Kirby and everybody admitting it. We don't have any weapons left for them. We're giving them nothing. Europe's got nothing. So Ukraine is just chewing through manpower and material, whatever they got left, and there's nothing left. And at some point in time, as long as I have a round in my weapon, I can kill you. But when I point the weapon and go click, and there's no more ammunition, or I pull the lanyard on the howitzer and click, there ain't nothing there, or I orient my air defense system and push the button and nothing fires because there's no more ammunition, it's over. It's over. And that's the point we're reaching very soon. There's nothing left in the barrel. They're using up the last of their ammunition. The Russians have figured out where they store everything. They're blowing up the reserves, the equipment, the manpower. We are looking at end game here. End game doesn't mean tomorrow. It doesn't mean next week. It doesn't even mean next month. The Russians, realistically, 3 of the commanders I spoke to were very optimistic that you will see major things happen in May, and that this war should probably be over by September. And based upon what I'm seeing, I have no reason to doubt that.
It makes sense because people like to think of conflict in the through the context of their everyday life. Something's going to take a week, a day, or a month. Whereas historically, I've heard of the infamous 100-Year War. You know what I mean? When it comes to time in a war, 6 or 8 months isn't very long. You know what I mean? When it comes to that, when you're talking about 6, 8 months, or even a year in a war, when you look at the length of time that wars last, it's not all that long. You mentioned um, Odessa. And there's a one of the big discussions recently is two things: how far will the Russians go? I think the Dnieper. And now I've even read things about the withdrawing, already discussion about withdrawing to Lvov, setting up a government in Lvov, the infamous Juan Guaido style government, and of course, doing some kind of a partisan war, where you're doing terrorism and stuff like that. And the first thing I thought to myself is, well, if I'm the Russians, that ain't happening. Because if you try to set something up in Lvov and you think you're going to harass me with that, I'm going to flatten it. But anyway, your thoughts on that concept of how far will the Russians will go, and this idea of withdrawing to Lvov and running a war of terrorism, asymmetry, whatever. Your thoughts on that?
I think everybody I spoke to made it clear to me, again, first of all, that the ultimate decision is made by Vladimir Putin and the Russian leadership. But the feel is that Ukraine can no longer be trusted to have Odessa or access to the Black Sea. That the Crimean Peninsula is strategic territory for Russia. And as long as Ukraine has a presence on the Black Sea, Crimea will be threatened, especially if NATO is able to get access to the Black Sea through Ukraine in any potential future conflict or something. So it's intolerable to allow Ukraine. Ukraine has forfeited its right to the Black Sea, is pretty much the feeling. And if you're going to do that, then you go all the way and you link up with Transnistria and you end that issue as well, so that there's no isolated strand of pro-Russian territory. Now there's connectivity. If you take Odessa, you have to take Mykolaiv, the province right above it. That's just a requirement. And if you're going to take that, then you're looking at the Dnieper line, and which means you're going to Dnipropetrovsk, that area, and Kharkov. So those are the territories that not only will be occupied by Russia, will probably become Russia. Meaning that there will be additional referendum and they will become Russian. But Russia isn't going to stop and allow Ukraine to regroup. Understand that Russia is looking for the strategic defeat of Ukraine. And more you hear the Russian government say that that Ukraine has forfeited its right to exist as a nation state, meaning Ukraine has currently configured is over. It's not going to survive. The Russians, I believe, will not allow a retreat to Lvov and a base of resistance to be built in Western Ukraine. I think it's over. I think that all of Ukraine will fall to Russia, one way or the other. And that, again, this is why I think it's important to start with Chechnya, because there's a lot of people right now saying, why would Russia want the headache of trying to absorb Western Ukraine with its history of Banderism? It's a different religion. They're Greek Catholics. They're just a different people. And my point is, Chechens were sort of different religion, different language, a lot of animosity. And look at the miracle that took place. So I think the Chechen miracle is what's in store for Western Ukraine. Russia cannot allow seeds of Banderism to be planted anywhere in the territories near Russia. They can't allow Western Ukraine to exist as this entity that's full of hatred towards Russia. And so I think that there's a whole bunch of political reconstruction of Ukraine that's going to take place once the war ends, once the Ukrainian army has been destroyed. Denazification means just that, the end of Banderism as a ideology that has roots in Western Ukraine. Western Ukraine's going to be cleansed of that. And that's more and more, I'm convinced that that's the direction this is heading. Because otherwise, all Russia's doing is they're winning a short-term victory, and then they're just setting themselves up for long-term failure. Russia's strategic objective isn't the defeat of Ukraine. It's a new European security framework with the rest of Europe that seeks to have, you know, uh, peaceful coexistence. You can't have peaceful coexistence if this poisonous entity called Banderist Western Ukraine continues to exist. So I don't see Russia allowing Banderism to continue to have a foothold in Western Ukraine. I don't. And I do think that Russia has the skill set to pick the right people, to find the Western Ukrainian version of Ahmed Kadyrov and work with him and come up with a solution that gives the Western Ukrainians that national identity they crave. Just like the Chechens. The Chechens are a very proud people. It's a republic. And they're like, we are Chechens. There's nothing problem. I don't think there's a problem in creating a Western Ukrainian republic, the capital of which is Lvov, populated by people that say, we are Western Ukrainians. Yes, you are. And you're celebrated. We celebrate your existence. We celebrate your differences. We celebrate your religion. We aren't here to oppress you, but you're part of the Russian nation. You're part of the Russian Federation. And I think that is a possible outcome here. And anybody who says, nah, it's impossible, man, too much hatred. Chechnya and Russia, dude, two wars, hundreds of thousands of dead, hate on both sides. And look at it today.
People who listen to my channel know I've been saying for a while, I believe that there will come a point where the Ukrainians will stop and look and they'll say, we're not mad at the Russians. They'll look back at the US empire. They'll look back at NATO and say, we've been had. You threw us in a cage with a bear and told us that you would arm us to defeat the bear, and we've been mercilessly mauled by the bear. We can't blame the bear. That's what bears do. You put us in a cage with a bear, they're going to maul you. It's in the job description. When you take the job as a bear right there at the top, you got to maul people, right? So their time is going to come where they're going to turn on NATO, turn on the US and say, I think we're getting close to it now, where they're going to say, we've been had. You told us you would arm us to the teeth. You told us you would help us. You told us everything. And then at some point, something started up in Israel, and you looked at us and you yawned and you said, you know what? We'll be over here. You guys do the best you can do. We're out of everything. And I think the time comes when they turn. I agree with you. They will say, well, we got this giant country next to us that has wealth and power and is willing to give us food and give us a job and help us with certain things. You know what? I think we're going to move in this direction. I think that has to happen, Scott. In fact, I agree. I don't see any way that doesn't happen. When they realize their entire generation of young men and women, and some old, have been wiped out, and they realize what they died for, Scott.
No, you're 100% correct. There's a gentleman, Alistair Crook. I think you might know him, former British intelligence officer with tremendous experience and tremendous insight. And I just was able to spend a couple of days with him and talk about these issues. And he shares this opinion. And again, when somebody of his caliber of analysis and such says exactly this, that the tipping point has already been reached inside Ukraine, where people are recognizing that they've been led down the wrong path, and you're seeing pushback inside Ukraine, and I think that will help foster an end game that can lead to reconciliation between Ukrainians and Russians. The Russians. Let's look at. This IL-76 was shot down, supposedly carrying 65 Ukrainian prisoners. I have no reason to doubt that. Mm-hmm. I'm looking forward to Russia providing the evidence of their presence on that airplane, so all the crap that's being spewed online can be put to an end. But it's sort of hard to provide evidence when you have an accident of that magnitude with a fireball of the intensity that was. There ain't so much physical evidence left. A lot of people don't realize what happens to a body in a crash like that. It ain't pretty. And then you subject it to consumption by fire, and it's tough to find DNA evidence. But look at the comments there. I can't find a Russian comment that says good. Every Russian comment is God bless their souls. God bless the people on there. God bless the families of the Ukrainians who are waiting for them. May they rest in peace. Just this genuine outpouring of sympathy and sadness over the death of not just the Russian pilots and Russian crew, the Russian escorts, but the Ukrainians. These are human beings. Then you go to the other side, the hatred. Good, Russians died. Good, yeah. Man, that's got to come to an end. At some point in time, hatred can't be your defining characteristic. And I think more and more Ukrainians are starting to wake up and say, that's not who we are. This isn't what we signed up for. And if Russia, Russia can fully. Garland, I was in Moscow. My host took me to a Ukrainian restaurant in downtown Moscow, where the hosts and hostesses, the waiters, the waitstaff, they wear Ukrainian national costume. They serve a menu that's printed in Ukrainian and Russian. It's a Ukrainian, and it was full of people who were there eating food and having. They're shutting down a restaurant in Washington, D.C., a Russian restaurant. You and I went there. You know the one I'm talking about.
Yep.
It's closing. It's closed its door on 29 January. This is a place that didn't have the courage not to rename the Moscow Mule drink into Kiev Kick or whatever the hell they called it. They changed their menu out of pressure by the hate of these anti-Russian Ukrainians in Washington, D.C. In Moscow, in a land where tens of thousands of Russian soldiers have lost their lives, this restaurant thrives and it retains its Ukrainian identity. The Russians aren't anti-Ukrainian. The Russians embrace Ukraine. Half of Russia is Ukraine, with a Ukrainian uncle or father or something. So the idea that Russia can't deal with a post-conflict Ukraine in a way that's respectful, that provides for dignity and provides for autonomy is just absurd in the extreme. It's the Ukrainians, nationalists, who have rejected the Russians. It's not the Russians who have rejected the Ukrainians.
Let's move. We got a few more minutes. Move to the Middle East. Joe Biden now is saying, okay, we're going to do a long operation in Yemen, an extended operation, which I might add implies something else. The Yemen Ansar Allah group has said that, we're going to fight until such time as, they bring in food and things like that. And they, stop what's going on with the Gazans. My understanding, I'm not sure if they said until they bring in food supplies or they stop the fighting. But at any rate, they gave a definite, this is what will cause us to stop what we're doing. If Biden says this is going to be a long-term assault on Yemen, then that means he's planning for what's happening in Gaza to go on for a long time. Your thoughts on the Biden, which is clearly an unconstitutional engagement on Yemen, what's going on there, the escalatory issues. I don't know if you heard about that. They said 21 Israeli troops got blown up. Apparently, they were planting mines in a building to blow up this building. Some Hezbollah, as they tend to do, and they weren't in Gaza. They were like they're saying this buffer zone, right? So here's my understanding. These are the weekend reservists, and they don't want to put the reservists all the way in Gaza where it's really hot and heavy. So they put them in this what they're going to call a buffer zone. So they're blowing up these buildings. They put tanks, mines all over the place, knowing that hey, the Hamas fighters can't get them there. Yeah, apparently that was an error. One of the Hamas guys, apparently one guy pops up with an RPG and shoots in, but they're loaded to the gills with mines. He hits the mines, a friggin' block or something goes up, and they lose The number we're told is 21. I'm reading there were ambulances and people, just so who knows how many injured, how many wounded. And as you said, when you're fighting in that rubble, yeah, it's not a winning combination. At any rate, um, your thoughts on the current state of affairs?
I don't know if Americans realize, but the U.S. Navy fought an engagement against the Houthi yesterday and lost. It was an operation where several U.S. naval destroyers were to form a screen, do a screening operation, and two U.S. flag container ships manned by U.S. merchant marines carrying U.S. military equipment were going to run the gauntlet, screened by the destroyers. So it's a military operation, and by the time the battle was done, the U.S. Navy had withdrawn, and the two ships had turned around and retreated from the air. We lost. We lost a stand-up fight against the Houthi. We failed to accomplish the mission. Not only that, but the two companies that own these ships, U.S. flag merchant marine ships, said, "We're done. We're not going to run the gauntlet again because the U.S. Navy can't protect us." And so they're done. It's the Houthi right now. The southern Israeli port of Eilat is empty. There's no ships there. They're losing billions of dollars. The Houthi have done something that the United States claimed could never be done. They've denied freedom of navigation to America and its allies in one of the most important, one of the most strategic waterways in the world, the Bab al Mandel. I think I've been butchering that for a long time, but the other thing it proves is that all along the United States has said that it could keep the Strait of Hormuz open. You know that. You remember that? The Iranians are threatening. We guarantee that the Strait of Hormuz will be open. You can't guarantee anything. The Houthi just kicked your butt in a stand-up fight that you picked. You designed, we, America, designed this battle. We said, this is how we're going to do it. We're going to screen. We're going to run a gauntlet, and then shoot it up through there, and they're going to protect them. And we lost. The Houthi beat us. That means that we can't guarantee international shipping, that international shipping will be accessible to us in war. This has implications beyond just Israel, Garland. This is
I'm thinking about the Taiwan Straits.
China. Well, understand this. If we go to war against China, we will lose economically and militarily. And it won't just be limited to China. Every single strategic strait in the world will be denied to us because what we've been shown is that our Navy is a legacy Navy using old Cold War era tactics and equipment that can't handle modern reality. So this is devastating for Israel. I have a hard time shedding any tears for Israel on this. I'm just not going to. You made your bed, you sleep in it, guys. I'm not going to cry for those 21, 24 or more Israeli soldiers. They were blowing up Palestinian homes, civilian homes, to create a buffer along the border with Israel. And, I said all along, when you bomb a place into rubble and you have a tunnel network, they're going to pop up and pop you. And they popped up and they popped them. And I'm sorry. So sad, too bad to be you. I can't cry for any Israeli soldier that loses his or her life in Gaza. You shouldn't be there. And what you're doing there, the genocide that you're committing, is reprehensible. I await tomorrow's ruling by the International Court of Justice. I hope that it's on the side of South Africa and in defense of the Palestinian people. The Israelis shot a unarmed man waving a white flag. There are no ifs, ands, or buts about him posing any threat, just straight up murder. They shot a woman holding the hand of her son as she crossed the street, waving a white flag, and they shot her. This is a war crime. Everything Israel does in Gaza is a war crime. So Israel's losing that war. Israel's talking about going to war against Hezbollah. I'll just tell you right now, if they fight Hezbollah, Hezbollah will not only defeat the Israeli army, Israel will lose the Galilee. They will lose northern Israel forever. They'll never get it back. They're going to lose the Golan forever. And this is good. This is good. Um, the Zionist entity, whatever you want to call it, it's over. They've lost. They can't win. And to give you more further examples, the United States isn't just facing defeat against the Houthi in Yemen. I mean, we're going to escalate the fight against the Yemenis? How so? What are we going to bring? We going to put Marines on the ground? I don't think so. I mean, Biden is just stupid. But to show you the dangers of long-term military presence in an area that doesn't want you there, it looks like we're withdrawing from Syria, and it looks like we're going to withdraw from Iraq. It's over. The American experiment is finished. The Carter Doctrine is done. Nail in the coffin. Thank you, Joe Biden. And it's actually a good thing that it's over. I wish it was done in a more peaceful manner that didn't have to resort to violence. But we're out of Syria. We can't sustain it. It's unsustainable. And we're out of Iraq. It's unsustainable. This is a huge victory for Iran, for the axis of resistance. But it also points out, while all this is happening, the hubris of America. We're now running an exercise. I forget what they call it.
The 90,000 in NATO.
90,000 troops in NATO exercise to project power through Norway, through Sweden, into Finland. Good luck with that one, guys. This was the largest exercise since Reforger 1988. Reforger 1980, it was 125,000. This is 90,000. But to show you how much of a joke this is, Reforger employed over 1,000, almost 1,100 tanks. This big exercise, 133 tanks, a brigade. That's it, because that's all we have. We don't have any more. We're sending an empty LSD landing ship, dock ship to Norway. One. And we're going to load up some Finns and Swedes on it and pretend that we're doing some sort of amphibious assault. One. I planned a Corps-sized amphibious assault against the Alfau Peninsula in support of Operation Desert Storm. To project power, the number of ships that had to be assembled and protected with air cover to do a forcible landing was many, not one. This is a joke. This exercise is actually underscoring how weak and pathetic NATO is, because they don't have any capacity for large-scale ground combat, and it's unsustainable logistically. They call it 90,000 troops, but I'm telling you, the number of combat troops involved is far less. The majority of those 90,000 are on ships and submarines. They're logistics support troops. They're drivers and such. But this is a joke. This is an absolute joke, and this underscores how weak we've become as a nation. Nearly $1 trillion a year in defense budget, and we can't do anything. And I know this is jumping, but I think you and I had a conversation a while back about America's rebuilding of their strategic nuclear arsenal. And I was on record then. The defense budget was saying, it's going to be $100 billion. And I went, by the time this is done, it's going to be $1 trillion, because we don't know how to build a system that works and can stay on time and on budget. Oh, well, the Sentinel missile has now, it has to go to mandatory congressional review because it's blown through the budget cap. Meaning they contracted a certain price. They've blown through it. They're close to 40% above budget. And then they're saying, we can't do it. It's too complex. And we're going to have to extend the timeline. And now if Congress was smart, they do it to that, what they did to the Crusader self-propelled artillery system, and say, we're done. Too expensive. We're pulling the plug. But they're not going to. Politically, they can't. They got to have that land-based nuclear delivery system to replace the Minuteman III, which is over 50 years old. So they're going to double down on stupid. We're getting ready to build $1 trillion system that doesn't work and will never work. That's the reality. And that's the reality of our defense budget. That's the reality of everything we do. We have a high-tech military that can't fight. They just proved it. Aegis-class ships, Aegis radar, the fantastic SM-3, SM-6 combination. We've got missiles, we've got radars, we've got ships. And the Houthi went, and we got drones and ballistic missiles, and you ain't going through the strait. And guess who won that battle? The Houthi. America, the empire is run its course. And I hope that we find a way to peacefully retrograde back to our soil and begin looking to heal ourselves here in America and spend that money where it needs to be spent, like maybe securing the southern border, maybe helping out with the homeless issue. Nice education plan would be good. Healthcare would be nice. Infrastructure. God, there's roads and bridges around Albany, New York. You're just going, oh my God, when are they going to repair it? Well, they need federal money. There ain't no federal money because we want to send $68 billion to the Ukrainians. We've lost, Garland. We've lost. And that's the takeaway here is that not just we, but anything we touch gets diseased and dies. I hope to God the Taiwanese are looking at this saying, don't touch us. Don't touch us. We don't want any of this.
I did want to ask you before we go. I was watching a video the other day where the Brits had become the Keystone Cops. It was in Bahrain, and there was like a British ship, and there was another one trying to turn around, and he slammed into him. Yeah. He couldn't turn the ship around. He slammed into another ship and caused massive damage to it. I recall, I'm sure you read this, where one of their nuclear subs, the bolts had come out and they used super glue. Anybody can search it right now. Literally, the UK, the bolts came out on their nuclear reactor. They held it together with super glue. They had another ship where they didn't put the propeller shafts in correctly and they were offset or something and the darn thing wouldn't run. It seems to me, and of course, we're reading about the German economy. It seems to me that Europe is in collapse, economic, military. People are saying, well, NATO step in. NATO, not just NATO, Europe is in total collapse. And at some point, I think the people are going to realize it and freak out. Anyway, Scott, since we're at the end, your last thoughts on that.
Well, let's just stay with the British military. I mean, they've got this new secretary or minister of defense, Schatz or whatever his name is. He's out there just spewing crap. And he has generals saying the same thing. We got to be prepared to fight. We got to do this. They have an aircraft carrier in port that can't go to sea. One, they don't have enough men to man the carrier. Two, they don't have any ships to sustain it at sea because a carrier is like a giant floating city. So while it's out there in the middle of the ocean, it doesn't have a farm. It needs to get food and supplies brought to it. They don't have sustainment ships that can go out to it. So they built this carrier that can't go anywhere. They had to retire 2 destroyers to take the crews off so they could man 1 new frigate. And even then, they don't have sufficient manpower for sustained deployment operations. The British Army continues to shrink. They're down to 74,000 troops. It's going to drop to 56,000 in the near future. And nobody's joining. Nobody wants to join. They have a recruiting problem in the Navy. That's why they're running out. And yet Britain's out there talking about we're going to be fighting Russia in 20 years and all this nonsense. Germany is a dying country as we speak. It's dying politically. It's dying economically. It has no military to speak of, none. And I think the Germans are starting to wake up to that fact that half of their airplanes can't take off because they haven't been maintained properly. They have no more tanks. They don't have the ability to build new tanks. Too expensive. The industry doesn't exist anymore. They've admitted now that they lost the artillery war. You remember, I love the people going, Russia's only this. It's one country with a GDP of X. And Europe and the United States are 30 plus countries with a GDP of X times this. We're going to swamp them. And I went, no, you're not. Because X works. X plus whatever it is, don't work. And now that it's turned out, they said, we can't do it. Russia's solved the ammunition problem. They're cranking out millions of rounds. They've ramped up. They're doing everything right. And in the West, we still haven't even begun to produce. And we're not going to because we can't. We are a dysfunctional society. We're the greatest thing in the world since sliced bread. We're the shining city on the hill. We don't work anymore, people. We don't work. We don't function the way we're supposed to. It's a sham. It's all a joke. $1 trillion a year to a U.S. military that can't win a war against the Houthi. It's that bad. And all of Europe's that way. That's why this exercise that they're running is just a joke and a half. If I were the Swedes, I'd immediately cancel my effort to join NATO because it's going to bankrupt. Mark my words, this interview today, January 25th, 2024. Scott Ritter is saying that joining NATO will destroy Sweden economically. They can't afford to join NATO because right now they have a very, very small military. This exercise is going to come through, and the first thing that's going to happen in the exercise is they're going to realize that this strategic line of communication connecting Norway through Sweden to Finland to reinforce the northern front that we just created by bringing Finland into NATO, they're going to go, can't sustain the traffic flow. So they're going to have to build up the infrastructure. We're talking billions of dollars to create a line of communication, which when the war starts is going to be destroyed by the Russians on day one. Day one. This is stupidity in the extreme, Sweden. You're going to go bankrupt. Your economy will not survive NATO membership, nor will Finland's. You're going to find out with this exercise that NATO can't do anything that it says it can do. They're going to lie about it, spin it, and all this stuff. But the reality is the post-exercise roundup, when everybody goes in, they're going to say, well, what needs to be done? And the laundry list of what's going to need to be done to bring NATO up to standards is going to be too long, too expansive, and too expensive. This is the reality. NATO is finished. It's over for NATO. It may last another 10 years, but NATO has killed itself because it can't afford to be what it wants to be, even though there's no need for it to be that. Russia's not going to attack NATO. It just isn't in the works. But you can't have this conversation today because nobody wants to have it. The Russophobia that's gripped this nation has blinded people to reality. It's USA, USA, USA. Look, you're not going to find a more patriotic person than me. Garland, I know you're a patriot too. We love our country, and we'll put it all on the line for our country. But being patriotic doesn't equate to being stupid or blind. The best patriot's a thinking patriot, someone who takes a look at the facts, someone who is grounded in values and principles set forth in the Constitution that's supposed to define us, who we are as a people. And a true patriot recognizes when we have deviated so far from course that the number one priority of America is to redirect ourselves back on track to who we want to be and not lie about things, not distort things. Russia is not our enemy. Straight up said it. Russia is not our enemy. But if we want to make them our enemy, then Russia will be the worst nightmare we've ever had because we ain't going to beat Russia any day of the week.
Scott Ritter, everybody, don't forget, go to scottritterextra.com. That's scottritterextra.com so you can see all of Scott's good works. And while you're there, look, all of the book writing and going to Russia and all of those things are very expensive. Certainly there's, I don't hear him barking, but there's some any barking or meowing, but I do know there's some animals over there and they're always hungry. And having had pets for many years, I can tell you, it gets expensive to keep them fed. So help Scott. Go to scottritterextra.com. There you can contribute to the cause, you can donate, and you can help keep Scott going. Thanks a lot, everybody. Scott Ritter, thanks a lot, man. Certainly appreciate it.
Thanks.
All right. Okay, thanks a lot, Scott. Guys, don't forget, share this on all your social media platforms if you have an opportunity. If you can, you see Buy Me a Coffee and all that stuff, Cash App and all that stuff going across the bottom. If you have opportunity to donate, I certainly appreciate it. Go to, I'm on Rumble and I'm on Rockfin, so make sure you go to both places and become a member. Just in case they throw me off YouTube, then you know where to find me on Rumble and Rockfin. Make sure everybody on YouTube has to go to Rumble and be and follow my channel on Rumble. And Rockfin, of course, doesn't cost a thing to join. However, you can become a contributor. It's $14.99 a month if you choose. And here and there, I will do some of my videos that will be premium for contributors only. Not that many, but here and there. So I certainly appreciate it. If you can't, just become a member. Thanks a lot, everybody. I'm out. Thanks a lot for Scott. Scott will be here every week and as much as he can. So thanks to you guys. Have a great day. And don't forget, share this on all your social